Hey guys, well, we made it through another hump day. We are moving towards the weekend again, and we are moving deeper and deeper into our exploration of Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie by Jordan Sonnenblick. And I wanted to touch on a couple of things that we've been talking about a lot over the course of the last few days. And I gave you another fire starter, which, as always, is down below this post, or this video, I should say. The fire starter was about the weirdness of acting normal when nothing really was normal, and how exhausting it is. And I included as part of that, I asked you to tell a story. I asked you to put a piece of narrative text together for your fire starter today. And again, if it was private, I allowed you to fold the page down. That's never an issue. I won't read anything you don't want me to read, kind of like the English teacher in this book. And that's always been the rule, just to remind you if you haven't been following that, and you've been like, oh, I could have been, understand that I would never tell anything that you don't want me to tell, and I would never say anything unless it directly affected your safety, because, let's be honest, I'm bound by law to do that. So, now that we've got that out of the way, back to the fire starter. I asked, as part of the kind of mental prompt for you, to write this mini personal narrative, I said, what did it feel like when you finally opened up and got this off your chest, when you came clean about what you were dealing with to somebody? How did it feel? How did it change the way you felt when you were finally able to open up? And the reason I asked this question is because, we saw Stephen do it in the chapter that you read for homework yesterday, and finally, all of a sudden, these people he's opening up to are finally able to help him because they actually understand what he's going through and are now able to make that connection and effectively communicate with him in a way that helps. Does this sound familiar? Understanding, connection, communication? It's what we've been talking about all year. That's why I like to call English language arts English life arts. Because when we understand the way that this works, okay, this notion and how, who we are influences what we do, which dictates the conflicts we get into, which forces us to change what we do based on who we are, and eventually when we resolve it, we can see some themes that keep coming up over and over again and allow that to change us. That's the main idea of that particular story, that short little narrative within our own life. What the main idea of that section of our lives was, so that we can change ourselves and start the whole process again as new, better, more experienced people. I bring that up because that's what we're seeing Stephen do. Now, Stephen couldn't have gotten any assistance from Renee and Annette if he hadn't opened up and explained to them what he was going through in terms of his math deficiencies because of all the class he missed. He couldn't have been helped by Mrs. Galley if he didn't open up to her finally. His dad wouldn't have changed anything he was doing until Stephen opened up about how his dad's actions were making him feel. And we see it again when he opens up to Mr. Stoll and actually tells him why he can't continue with lessons from him. Mr. Stoll then says, this is in what we read today, so spoiler alert if you weren't here, but Mr. Stoll says, I couldn't accept your special sticks from you as a way of thanking me even though you have to leave. No. Let me thank you for being my best student. I'm not going to charge you for these drum lessons. I know what they mean to you, and I know what you mean to me, and I know this relationship we have, and I want to help you out the best way I can. And we said, isn't it interesting that people that we think might not understand us, as soon as we open up to them, they want to help in whatever way they can. I mean, tutoring math doesn't seem like that big a deal in the grand scheme of life, but little problems can become big problems when too many of
the names of those students that are involved in
Sorry.
modified track. Those students who are in modified track.
This is the problem with doing this 8th period, is that sometimes you get interrupted by messages, and I don't even have a class right now, and she's talking to teachers who have class. So,
again, modified track players are to be excused.
Okay. We heard. We got an email about this.
Thank you.
Okay, so anyway, where was I? People who we might never expect would understand the situation we're in are willing to help us. I'm dressed down today to help out to raise money. When teachers dress down, we donate money to different causes. Today is the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Now I know a couple of people with cystic fibrosis, but I don't know all of them, but that doesn't stop me from wanting to help. And some of my friends with cystic fibrosis don't need my help, but some people do. And I'm willing to do that because it means something to me as a human being to be able to help other human beings. And that's part of the discussion we got into. You know, and I told you about this as I related my own personal life back to Mrs. Galley and Stephen's situation. I went to school at Geneseo, okay? And at Geneseo I was outnumbered, as were all of the guys on campus, by girls. And it was by a lot. There were like 9, when I started, there were like 9 girls for every guy on campus. And as such, I'm a communicator. You guys know that about me. I probably wouldn't be an ELA teacher if I weren't. But I wound up with a lot of girlfriends. Not girlfriends, hey girl, but girlfriends, female friends. And so, because I was a communicator, a lot of them would come to me about some of their problems, particularly with boys, because they were trying to get a handle on the conflict. Now, I was known in college as the best listener. You're the best listener, John. You're so good. You're so smart, and you're such a good listener. The reason people thought that is because when they came to me with a problem, I listened to what they had to say. I took it all in, I organized their thoughts, and I summarized their thoughts back to them. And they would say, "Oh my God, you're so right. That's the best advice I've ever gotten. How did you..." They had the advice in their own heads. They knew what to do, but because they were involved so directly in the conflict, they could not ultimately look and see what kept coming up over and over again that they could learn from and ultimately resolve the conflict with. They couldn't see it. They were clouded by being in the middle of the conflict. Stephen is there too right now. He's maybe starting to come out of, he's resolving some of his conflicts, and he's starting to see, hey, I can change some things. It doesn't make sense to worry about the things I can't change. I have to worry about some things I can change. Well, we as a class were coming up with that solution, that resolution, that theme, that possible main idea days ago, because we can step back, take a look hypothetically at Stephen's situation without being clouded by the conflict, and understand entirely how to alter what we're doing to resolve the conflict to the point where we can actually learn something about what's happened in this situation and change ourselves with it and start the process over again. This is what's so powerful about unlocking when we're talking about ELA, when we're talking about literature, when we're talking about this business of life, really. Attempting to understand it, attempting to connect to other people to get through it and communicate with one another effectively as a result. I tagged a page in this book because Stephen makes a good analogy that I want to make sure you got. It said, "I knew that in the long run, that was about as useful as duct taping over your car's fuel gauge so you won't run out of gas." It doesn't help us to ignore the problem. We have to attempt to solve the problem in some way, shape, or form if we're going to hope to get past it. I'm gonna get that voicemail later. Hopefully that's not one of your parents. Hopefully it's just reminding me about a meeting I've got at 3:30. One last thing I wanted to talk about that we talked about in class today. This business of Stephen writing this journal entry after Annette breaks her arm, again, spoiler alert, sorry. Annette breaks her arm, and he's really reflecting on his brother's cancer and all of this stuff, and he's saying, if there was one word to describe the universe, it would be unfair. And you know what? He might have something there. The world, the universe, life doesn't seem very fair a lot of the time. But it's all about our perspective. Because I might look at somebody who's got a ton of stuff, who doesn't struggle, who's got, everything going for them in life, and I might say, it's so unfair that they have that and I don't. I work so hard for it, why don't I have that? But if you're willing to do that, you have to be willing to look the other direction too, and take a look at even what just happened, I believe it was in northern Nigeria, just I think it was either today or yesterday where people just opened fire on and killed 300 people who were just in the middle of the marketplace. And all of the turmoil and unrest that's going on in those countries, and people being abducted, and people struggling just to survive the day in places like that, the Middle East, in India, heck, in our own country. And if I'm willing to call somebody who's got more than I do, if I'm willing to call that situation unfair, I have to be willing to say it's unfair that I have this and they don't have that. And we got into this discussion and conversation. We say, you know, instead of worrying about the things I can't change, I need to worry about the things I can change, and how I interact with people and how I perceive the world. Those are things that I can change. And we see Stephen do a really fantastic deed as a result of this type of thinking that he's going through, as a result of what he's learning. We see him shave his head so that his little brother, who got offended, or not offended, who was sort of devastated by the realization that he is bald and that other people can notice that as a result of his treatments, because of that little kid who didn't know any better to say that to him. Stephen says, you know what? I'm going to make it so that he doesn't feel strange for having a bald head. I'm going to make myself bald to show support for him. That's huge. And that change in perspective really shows us how Stephen is growing. And we can grow along with him just by utilizing these same principles. Because the author designed this. Jordan Sonnenblick's purpose, it seems, was to bring up some of these themes that have kept coming up over and over and over again. And some of them are becoming central themes. So much so that when we look at the main idea at the end, some of our ideas and our predictions about what the main idea is might actually wind up being true. That's how wonderful it is to be able to dig into this literature, dig into our own lives, and really make those connections so that literature becomes less of a thing that we have to do and more of this thing that helps us understand, which allows us to connect, which enables us to communicate, which has been the goal all year. Guys, I love this. I'll see you tomorrow.